The way we communicate depends on both our cultural background as well as the culture in which the communication takes place. Imagine that you are visiting an elderly relative and his elderly neighbors. Even though you may share the same nationality, you will still experience some challenges simply because you have many different cultural references. We don't need to go outside our own families to experience this. If you are a clinical supervisor, chances are that you will meet many layers of cultural differences and many possibilities to explore and develop your cultural communication skills. Geographic, gender, age, professional field, ethnicity, religious, political, educational. The way in which we interpret and understand a situation will influence how we understand and respond to what is being communicated. This can lead to misunderstandings and a loss of information. Handled skillfully, it will lead to enriched understandings. A key to enriching communication is to focus on why participants communicate the way they do, rather than on what they are saying. We can use a cultural axis to help us understand this. An axis can help us to compare cultural similarities and differences, and it can help us to see culture as an expression of different external and internal factors. We can start by imagining a scale or a trajectory from one value to another, like from west to east, or from punctual to more relaxed. We can look at strangers, family and friends, some other trajectories could be, for example, an expressive body language, and a reserved body language. If we continue, we can think of patient autonomy, and passive patience. We can think of students who are used to actively seeking information, and students who have learned to receive informations. And finally, we could think of, for example, a religious society and a secular society. Well, what happens if we start to put some of these examples together? Let's start with the punctual value and bring that down to the flexible. And we'll cross it with active, an active student, and a passive student. Let's say that you are a supervisor and you place a high value on being punctual, and you are also used to taking control. You are an active person. We will put a large capital S up there for you. You are punctual and you are active. Imagine then that you have a group of patients or clients or customers who also value being punctual, but they are not particularly active. We'll put a client, customer, patient mark up there. And finally, you have a student coming in, and this student highly values spending time with family and friends. This is part of her cultural background. That makes punctuality not number one on her list. She thinks it's more important to spend time with patients and making sure that she's really listened and had a good conversation than getting to a meeting on time. And she's also used to being told what to do, what to read, and basically how to think. She's not a very active student. So we will put her down there. So we have a very punctual and active supervisor, patients who value punctuality but are not that active in taking care of themselves. And we have a student who values being flexible with time and is used to being told what to study and what to read rather than finding this out for herself. What kind of conflicts or challenges do you think you would meet in a situation like this? Let's look at a new situation. Let's say we have an axis that has the individual at the top and collective values on the bottom. Then cutting through, we have a religious orientation, and to the right we have a secular orientation. Let's say that our student highly values an individual orientation and is secularly oriented. We'll put a small s up there for that student. Let's say that our patients or our clients are quite religious and they have a very collective and family group sort of orientation. Customer, client, or patient. And finally, we'll put in you, the supervisor, and let's say that you also have a strong collective family group orientation, but you are not particularly religious. We will put you in there. What sort of situations do you think might crop up if you have this kind of a group that you are working with? Patients who have very family orientations and are quite religious. You have a strong collective or family orientation but are not particularly religious. And you have a student who is highly focused on the individual and is very secular. And let's do one more. Let's say we have a hierarchical organization structure. At the top, and we have a flat organization structure at the bottom. With the hierarchical organization, you'd have a very strong boss who decides what will be going on that day and nobody questions it. With the flat structure, you might have a situation where everyone is allowed to have an opinion and most of those opinions are catered to in one way or another. You could have a very hierarchical family structure with a very strong mother or father deciding how things are done. With the flat structure, it would be more like living in a collective. And we will cross that with students who have been taught to actively seek knowledge. And students who are taught to wait and receive knowledge. So this time, let's put our student down here. Student coming from a culture that is used to a flat structure and also is used to seeking knowledge and maybe challenging professors and supervisors with articles and other research he or she may have found. We'll put the supervisor up here. The supervisor comes from a culture that's very hierarchical. The supervisor is used to being listened to and people not questioning whatever directions are given. And we'll put the clients or the patients down here. They're neither hierarchical or a flat structure in focus. And they are used to students being rather passive. They don't expect the students to come with suggestions for treatment or interventions or other ways of doing things. What sort of situations do you see cropping up in a situation like this? And how would you address them if you were the supervisor in this situation? So we've played around with axes a little bit, and you can see that they may be a way to help you and your supervisee visualize the kind of communication challenges you may be facing. Even though we can put this in a diagram, it doesn't mean that culture is static. And even though you may think a student is coming from a religious culture or a hierarchical structure, there will of course be individual variations. So it's a good idea to sit down with the student and try and figure out what values you are addressing and put them into an axis and see where you each place each other and discuss together how you can reach a better kind of communication than what you may be facing at the moment.